Oh, that's a close-up of Mr. Wickham.
See why he wasn't a movie star.
Yeah. I wish I'd have brought my glasses, but I didn't.
Hi, Tom.
It's pretty cool. We got ghosts. Daryl and
Oh,
Chris.
that's weird.
Yeah, Daryl and Chris is there.
I just looked up and went, that's weird.
It is weird. I'm staring at that. I'm
If they
looking over.
move,
and
I'm gonna freak.
What in the
If they
world?
so much as turn their head, it's over.
We're not wearing the same color.
I know, I'm gonna say. Oh, boy.
If they start whispering in your ear, that's when I'd freak out.
Is Chris coming?
I haven't heard from either one of the absentees.
Okay. If he comes, I'll return this.
Okay. Guys ready? All right. We'll call this work session to order at 6:02, and I will turn the floor over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council, as well as the newly elected council members. Tonight, what we have prepared for you tonight is what we call our new council member training. So our comments will be directed at the two new council members. It's been kind of prepared for their benefit. The rest of council has already heard these things in the past, but it's a good refresher for everybody on these things. And so as we go, whatever questions you may have, or if you want me to explain things more fully, please just interrupt, and I'm happy to do that. So we have three different sections tonight of our training. The first section, I will go over the financial side of how our city is structured, the different funds that we have, what the funds are used for, a little bit of the components of those funds. I'll go over a lot of the priorities that we have that we're working together on so that we could have a brief discussion over those so that the new council members will be able to at least understand and have heard of these different things that we have going. And then our city attorney, Benita Minberry, will go over some of the legal things with her job and how she interacts with council. And then we will conclude the meeting at that point. Mayor Wycombe will have a few remarks and essentially pass the baton on to the new council at that time. So to begin tonight, I will talk a little bit about our financial structure. You should have a PowerPoint presentation that, is it gonna come up here or is it just gonna be?
No, because she has,
Oh,
did you send it to me?
Are you gonna just,
Everybody has the handouts in front of them, so we'll just go with it that way. So to start off with the organization of the city financially, all organizations have a general fund. And within that general fund, it's where all of the financial information is captured for all activities of the governmental entity, except for those that are required to be accounted for in a different fund. So it is essentially the general area that catches all of the information. We have on our general ledger, we break out some different areas into funds, which for audit purposes roll up into the general fund at the end of the year. So they are general funds, but we account for them separately in different funds. So for us, our general fund is Fund 10, and then we have 5 different recreational departments that we account for under Fund 15, which is the recreation fund, so that we can account for those. We have a Fund 40 on our books that is called Impact Assistance. And the Impact Assistance funds are those funds that we are receiving as a result of the projects occurring in Carbon County that have an impact to the communities. And we receive those funds, and we track those separately so that we can match the expenditures that we have for those against those revenues. But at the end of the year, it rolls into the general fund. And the last two are the dangerous buildings funds, which are Fund 11 and 12. One is dangerous buildings and the other is housing loans. That goes back. And so we account for those, like I said, separately, but in the audit report, they are all considered general fund. We have 3 capital project funds that we account for separately. The first one is the 6 penny fund. We account for that in our Fund 46, and that captures all the revenues that we receive off of the 6 penny issue that we have. And then we have 2 other funds that are a result of prior 6 penny fund issues that were not all the way spent out, that we still have some remainder funds in, and we call those the Capital Facilities Fund, Fund 47, and Capital Facilities Number 2 Fund, Fund 49. Then we have a component unit, which is the Downtown Development Authority. And what a component unit is an organization that the city has enough influence on the organization that it really should be accounted for as part of the city's operations. So they are in our audit report, but it is a component unit, and that's the Downtown Development Authority. We have 1 internal service fund, which is our self-insurance. Our health insurance is all accounted for separately. And then we have 4 enterprise funds, the water fund, sewer, landfill, recycling fund, which are all separate funds. And when we get into it, the enterprise funds must be set up to, so that the revenues equal the expenditures. They have to be able to take care of themselves financially without added added resources or excess resources being transferred out. They really should be able to control their expenditures and revenues and match those together. So if you go to the second slide, it's just a definition of the general fund. And it's, I won't read through that, but it's essentially all information that is not required to be in a separate fund that we had talked about. On the third slide, what I wanted to show to everybody is the fiscal year 25 budget. We had right at 87 positions throughout the city of Rawlins in our general fund that we employ, and you can see by the graph to the right by department how much their staff percentage-wise matches up with that of the city. Obviously, the police department has 27% of the staff. The fire department is at 14%, and then the 911 dispatch is 10%. Streets is also at 10%, so that you can kind of see how our city's broken out and how we apply the staffing to the different departments. On the next slide, you can see that with the enterprise funds added in, we have right at about 25 positions to our enterprise funds. That brings the overall total of our city and employee count up to 111 employees that we have. And you can see by the graph there on slide 4 that 64% of them are general fund, 22% are enterprise, and then 14% are in the recreation department. On slide 5, what I wanted to share with you a little bit and discuss is within our general fund, I wanted to talk about our revenues a little bit and where they originate. How do we fund the general fund? So as you can see by the budget category, second column from the right, we are right at about $12 million that we fund the general fund with. It's right at about 12 million, and 89.66% of that, or roughly 90%, is taxes and assessments, which are sales tax, property tax, lodging tax, all the different taxes that are collected that are forwarded from those sources to the city to operate the general fund. Intergovernmental makes up 2.8%. And then we have charges for services. The city performs some services to the community in which there is a fee charge for that. And we will be looking at that at the January 21st, I believe, work session. We'll go over the rates again like we did last year. Make sure that those are set properly, but it's about 2.5% is there. 2.8% is our investment interest off of the investments that we have. 1.43 are from miscellaneous sources, and transfers from other funds to the general fund in 2005 made up about 0.71%. And what that represents is the central garage works on equipment that belongs to the enterprise funds, to the water fund, sewer fund, and so those funds should have to pay for those services. So we estimate that, and that's what we transfer over. You can see in the bottom left graph there, revenue by year. In fiscal year 21, we received a lot more taxes and assessments due to the wind projects that were occurring at that time and the sales tax that was collected off of that. And you can see in 2022 that really dropped off. And then we have had a few projects, but you can see our revenues have somewhat stabilized the last 3 years, although it has continued to drop a little bit. With the wind projects that are scheduled to occur, you'll see that revenue number go up significantly in the next few years if those projects come to fruition. On slide number 6, what we have here is a breakdown of the taxes and assessments that the city collects. And this gets it down pretty close to the actual source. So we get some property tax that comes in. Our main source is our sales and use tax. It comes from the state of Wyoming. It comes back to us. The fifth penny tax is important to note here in that what the fifth penny tax is, you know, it's the fifth penny issue, and the city of Rawlins, when we applied for that, we wanted to have the ability to apply that towards operations. Most cities put that towards capital. It's their 1 cent capital purchases. But here we have, you know, we have the illegal right, and we put that fifth penny tax towards our operations. That comes up every so often, has to be renewed. And if it was not renewed, we'd be out about $3.3 million there. So that's the fifth penny. Motor vehicle tax is what we pay on our licensing at the county on our license plates. Lodger's tax comes from the hotels. Franchise taxes are taxes collected from utility companies that use the city property that have infrastructure and different things on our property, and that we're able to collect those taxes for that. Cigarette tax, gas taxes, and then the last one there is severance taxes, which are the mineral royalties that we get through the state. So you can see it comes out to about $10.8 million on that, and that's overall the sources. Now, a lot of these taxes, like the sales tax, there is kind of a floor on it to where our population will sustain basically the same amounts from year to year, but it can really fluctuate because of outside projects that come in, and we collect sales tax on those projects, and so it does go up and down quite a bit. So it is hard year to year to estimate what they should be. You can see in 2021 they were just under 15 million, and now we're at 10.8, so it has dropped significantly since then. And as of December 31st, we received right at about 50% of that. We hit that right on with the taxes received compared to the budget. So those are the taxes. Real quick, on slide 7, you will see the intergovernmental monies that we receive. The large ones here is in 2021, we received a large COVID-19 grant from the state, and we used that money to put towards salaries of first responders at the time. And so we were able, like I said, to apply that there. And then we also had 2 ARPA grants in 23, 24. The ARPA funds have essentially dried up since then. We haven't had those to use, so you can see that our overall intergovernmental revenue was dropped to $343,000 is our estimates. Couple things here just to note. The resource officer reimbursement about halfway down to $75,000. That's received from Carbon County School District as a reimbursement of our school resource officer. Officer Yardley is the one that fills that role. The advocate grant for federal and for state, that goes to fund the Victims Advocate Program that is under the police department. Those are federal funds. 911 surcharges come through the phone bills for the 911 system. Those are just the surcharges that residents pay for phone service that comes back to help us fund that. And the municipal judge, $120,000, are the citations and things that the police department writes for like speeding tickets and those types of things. Charges for services on slide 8. These are the ones that are basically covered under the rates that we charge. A couple of the larger ones that we have is where we lease out land that the city has that we lease. That's roughly $63,000. We do a lot of building permits out of community development for building permits. We've estimated that at about $62,000. And you can see as you go through, these are just all the different things off of our rate schedules for the services that apply to general fund services. On slide 9, miscellaneous revenue, interest income, as you can see there, has increased over time. This is a result of increased interest rates. This is one area that we're looking this next year to double or even triple that amount of interest income in there by increasing the amount invested outside of the banks. Couple others, the lottery, state lottery, we've estimated that at about $70,000. And a new source of revenue is the horse racing in 2022. And as you can see by what we received in 2024, that has really increased and really done well within our community. We set the $80,000 budget well before we received all those payments in there, so we will adjust that in the 26 budget to increase that. On slide 10, we have the expenditure side. So we've kind of covered all the revenues. Now we go to the expenditure side. So under the account name to the far left are all of the departments that are contained within the general fund. And what you will notice is that it is everything that the city does outside of those that are capital or within the enterprise funds. This is going to count for all the other departments. The percent to the far right is the percent of the total. So as you can see, our police administration is the largest department with about 22% of our general fund budget going there. Fire department is second at about 10.93%. And then our recreation at the bottom as a whole is about 18.25% of our overall budget goes towards recreation. And so you can kind of go through there and see the different departments that the city has and essentially how we fund that within there. Is there any questions so far on the general fund that we have? And I am available whenever you have a question afterwards. But
No, it makes sense. Thank you.
there's a lot of information here.
Yeah.
On slide 11, I just wanted to put down a quick definition of our capital projects funds and what items that we would put under capital projects. The three that we have are the 6 penny tax and then the other two that were the former 6 penny tax. So all of those funds are legally obligated to go towards capital items. So they're kind of outside of the general fund. They are accounted for there. If you could, if we could skip slide 12 for the time being and go to 13. What I wanted to point out here is on the 6 penny ballot, these are the different projects that we put on the ballot with the estimated cost for the 6 penny. So you can see that the total issue of it is about $12.1 million of that. Well, as we go to perform this work, as these funds are collected, inflation has really hit these numbers. So we will not be able to perform all 9 of these, 10 of these projects because we just will not receive enough funds through the 6 penny to keep up with inflation. We have been able to complete the Walnut Street replacement from 3rd to 7th. The one that we are eyeing right now is the Edinburgh Street replacement. And on here it's 2.3 million. Our estimated cost of that now is upwards of $7 million, if not even higher than that. And so we have not been able to perform that project because we just don't have enough cash in there yet. On slide 14 is
Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Please.
can you explain the collection of the 6 penny tax and that we did not bond and how that
Yes.
all fits together?
Yes, so with the collection of this, we collect in there roughly about 1.3 million a year, which, like I said, it isn't enough to perform that. And so we had an option at the beginning of this to bond. And what we would do with that bonding is we could borrow in advance and get the work done at the current rate of inflation at that time. Okay, so we could have taken out a bond and said, let's go do these projects with the money at that point. We'd have to pay interest to the bondholder and whatever, but it would have got the work done, the project done at the time when inflation was lower. But we did not bond, so over time, the inflation has gone up, and now we have to pay the inflated cost of it.
I think it's also important to note that because of the number of projects, even if we would have bonded to do all of these projects at once, would have closed down, I don't know how many streets, how many portions of the city, and being able to bring that many contractors in is probably not realistic. So that's why bonding sounds like one way to do it. So like you finance a house, so you finance the house, just sort of put it in a different perspective. To get the repairs done, to renovate the bathroom, to renovate the kitchen, to renovate the backyard, put in everything, can you do it all at once? Does it make sense? And can you find all those contractors at the same time? And that is also the type of situation that this reflects when you have this many large projects.
Well, and it was before all of our times, I think, but another reason I was told was that when you bond, you are borrowing against the assets of the city, and there's a certain limitation to that too. and the city wasn't in a good situation to do that. Is that correct, Tom?
Yes, yes, that is right. When you bond, you have to have a bond rating. And wherever that bond rating, if it's more risky, you pay a higher interest rate. And we just were not in a really prime position at that point.
Yeah.
Okay, on slide 14 is a quick glimpse of the last 4 years within the 6 penny tax. You can see that as of December 31st, we're holding right at $5.2 million in the 6 penny fund, and Edinburgh is estimated about 7.2 million was kind of the last guess. So our strategy at the budget time was to allow for one more year to collect the tax, and then we would use $1 million out of our impact assistance fund for that. And then whatever was left would be basically a loan out of the general fund so that we could get that work done this spring, summer with that. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that real quick. To go back to slide 12, I kind of got this out of order a little bit. The city of Rawlins over the years has obtained some really nice assets like the recreation center, the softball fields, VFW fields, all of these different things, but as they have aged over time, we have not been good at putting money aside for the replacement of those items. And so what I wanted to show with this slide is within the general fund, our depreciation expense each year runs at about $1.5 million. And what depreciation essentially represents is the loss of value over time of those assets. So if we were to replace these assets that we have, we would want to set aside in what we call funded depreciation enough money over time so that when the asset reaches end of life, we have enough money saved to purchase the new asset. And so I wanted to show on here what the status of our depreciation is for book purposes. And as we all know, inflation has hit this really hard. So these numbers are low because of inflation. But we have right at about $1.5 million each year that is depreciated. And overall, we have $21.7 million in our accumulated depreciation. So if we were to replace the assets on the depreciation schedule at the historic cost, we should have $21.7 million put aside for that purpose. And right now, we have not even established that funded depreciation fund, but there is money in our cash reserves within the general fund to put some money in that direction once we get a policy in place to help us with that. And we could start funding that each year. We put within the budget last year $1 million for capital. And with the depreciation at 1.5, we lost about $500,000 in value there that, like I said, that is within older equipment that we have not replaced. So we are kind of upside down on that a little bit. On slide 15, I got a lot of information here, but I wanted to talk real quick about a balanced budget. I know council has assigned me each year to bring forth a balanced budget. And what that is where our revenues that we bring in, that we have either equal amount of expenditures or less than expenditures. We got to make sure that we're at least able to hold the expenditures to the amount of revenues that we have so that, we can balance the budget. The last couple years, we've had a lot more expenditure needs, cash outflow needs, than we've had revenue. So there's had to be a few things that we've held back a little bit on that we haven't done in order to have that balanced budget. On the bottom left, you can see the general fund schedule, and you can see that our revenues exactly equal our expenditures, that they go to zero. To the right of that, in order to accomplish this, we have frozen 5 different vacant positions that we have froze, that we just said we're not going to budget for those next year. We will work with the budget to find those funds to get those funded again in the next year. We had 3 police officers, a parks technician, and a project coordinator at the DDA. Also, part of what was not included in the budget was $1 million that we had estimated towards street projects. We just figured all the street projects would have to be pushed off till we could bring the budget back in. Capital, like I said, we capped that at 1 million. We figured in order to keep pace, we needed about 2 million. When you add it up, the sacrifices that we made are about $2.5 million from, if those items were in the budget, we all feel these are very high priorities, but they were removed in order to balance the budget. So this spring is our budget season, and we've got a lot of work cut out for the new council to be able to put a lot of those things back into the budget and to see what we could do in order to balance the budget. And that'll start on my end next Tuesday. I'm going to pass out budget work papers to department heads, and this process of the budget will begin. One thing that we are aiming at this year budget-wise that Benita and I feel is really important that we've slacked a little bit on in the past is more discussions with council, as to your thoughts on it. A lot of these things, I met with department heads, we came up with the budget, presented it, and we had discussion at that time. We want to get council in a lot more beforehand so that we could get a little bit more clearer picture of where council's coming from, and that you can get more from us as to where we're headed. So anyway, that's the balanced budget slide. Enterprise funds, on slide 16, I have the definition there of what an enterprise. The main thing there is it has to be self-supporting. So whatever they spend, they need to have revenues in. The city currently has 4 enterprise funds: the water, sewer, landfill, recycling. I can say that there is, financial stresses in almost all of those enterprise funds to make them self-supporting. And as you know, we had to increase the water rates because of the projects we have, and increase the sewer rates, and all those are an effort to make those funds self-supporting. The next slide on 17, that is somewhat out of place, but I want to touch on it real quick, and I'm sorry this is so small up there to get it on. Within our water fund, we've had a lot of discussion about our water transmission line and the repairs and the things that are needed on that. We had a water master plan performed. that WWDC paid for, and we had WWC out of Laramie perform that. And the projects that you see to the left were all identified through that study. And we have priority 1 and we have priority 2 projects. And between the two, you can see the total right now is estimated at $48,500,000. And we have about $500,000 in cash reserves in the water fund right now. So you can see what we're up against. A lot of the issues that we're having as of late are priority 2 projects, you know, so they're really, all of them are very high priority, but our priority 1 totals just under $30 million between the Sage Creek boxes, you know, the other components. There's still wood stave pipeline up in the basin. We have replaced 10,000 feet, but there's more than 10,000 still left that have to be replaced. The transmission line that brings the water from the main junction box at the basin to the plant. The water storage at Tank Farm, and then the high pressure line bringing the water from the plant to town, and our SCADA system. It was about 29. Priority 2 projects are about $18,800,000, and to date we've secured right at about $3.7 million of grant funding. The most recent that we had is we went before the Wyoming Water Development Commission about a month and a half ago, and we received a $2.3 million grant for the transmission line. We do have a community development block grant. It's just under $1 million for the SCADA system. And then we have some ARPA grants that we've been able to secure for the spring boxes. So anyway, that's just a high level discussion of our needs of water. We're looking at several years to be able to raise enough money to handle that. We get about $3 million a year in revenue, and we're looking at about $48 million overall. So we're gonna have to go get loans and grants and everything that we can possibly do to get there. I wanted to go over real quick, just at a high level, and we'll take a deeper dive into these in the future. But as the new council members are onboarded, I wanted to share with you some of the priorities that the existing council has tasked me with, or different things that we are working on. And I'm happy now to go into more detail, but I will just kind of touch on these at a very high level right now. We are doing a financial system software changeover. We have a current accounting system, financial system that is still very paper driven. We still sign paper timesheets. They're still filled out by hand. Our purchase requisitions are all signed in ink. You know, we don't use our system for any of that. And so we are working on a new software system. The one we selected is called Software Solutions. We have completed phase 1 of about 4 different phases. And so we are getting into the training section of that to where we could start to train. But that is very time consuming, as you know, to change over accounting. We're also looking to expand our financial systems into inventory, into work orders, and to a lot of things that we currently just do not have. I went over the water transmission line with you a little bit. We have a study that I have here. We have several in-town water sewer projects. I'm asked almost every day about if we're working on this over here or this over here. We have several of those. We have a brownfield grant through the DEQ, federal monies, and we are, to the point on that, we've selected a contractor. We are working on that contract with them, and then we will start. What the brownfield grant will do is it will assess the environmental damage to older buildings, dilapidated buildings. There's phase 1 test, phase 2, where they take samples and they say there's asbestos in this or petroleum here. And that overall grant is $500,000 that we have. So we have selected a contractor. We're moving forward on that. We have found from 2012, which I was made aware of just recently, the city of Rawlins performed an economic development plan through Zions Bank, and I have that right here. When we look at that, to my knowledge, it's what was issued in 2012, and it kind of stayed about 10 years ago. We haven't really updated that. So our plan is we're going to go through that report and make that council's view of economic development and use that as a guide or as a starting point. And so I can get that document out to everybody, and we can start on that. Also in 2012, there was a comprehensive master plan, which was essentially a land use plan, and that was performed by Landmark. And it was also performed in 2012, and reading through there, we received their report, and I think it went on a shelf just shortly after that, because what prior councils have done is not totally in alignment with what's in there. And so we're gonna use the same approach with that as the economic development plan, use that as a starting point, and we're gonna make that belong to the city council and have it be what they want in there. If we need to change directions or follow, we're gonna do that. One of the main things that I've been tasked with is an employee policy manual. The one that we currently have, do you know when that was adopted?
It was originally adopted in 2008 with updates in 2021. So it's not
Okay.
completely out of date, but that doesn't mean it doesn't need some love.
Yeah, it goes back, like I said, 2008 is when a lot of these things, were being discussed as far as FMLA and a lot of these different things. And staff has taken one stab at that, and we need to work with that so that we can update employee policy. We've ran into, even this week, 4 or 5 major staffing issues that, that we went back to the old policy, and it really wasn't that helpful at this point. There's just new law, new regulations. That really needs to be updated. We are working on a department reorganization throughout the city, and we are moving some departments from one department head to a different department head, and there is lots of reasons behind that. There's a lot of strategy behind that, and I'm happy to go over that. We are ready on 3 of the departments to have the actual meeting to make the changeover on that, and then the others we're still working on. We have somewhat started a salary study. There again, staff kind of took a stab at it a couple years ago, and there were some issues in there, And so we have that study. It has not been put into place. And working on a separate project this week from 2018 to 2014, we've had about 35% inflation during that time, and our salaries have increased, I believe, 8%. We went 5% last year, and there was a couple years before that, we went 3%. And so if you take 35 from 8 to go back to 2018, we are significantly behind in salaries. Our staffing fluctuates over time. We get really low on staff, and then it picks up. Most areas of the city right now, staffing is good, but there are a couple areas where it is below critical staffing. And so I think those are the areas that we really need to look at first. One of the things with our balanced budget is we are working on business plans for all the different activities we do to make sure that we're doing it right up to industry standards, business standards. So we are working on that. Cash reserves. When I started a couple of years ago, basically everything was sitting in a bank account, all of our cash reserves. We need to invest those at a much higher interest rate. Banks have paid well below 1%, and a lot of these investment pools now are over 5%, and I think we can do better than that elsewhere. Deferred maintenance. On slide 19, if we could just skip there real quick. Last year, we had a $1.7 million budget amendment through council because certain areas related to our heating, air conditioning, HVAC, all those different areas, building maintenance, were way past end of life. Some of these, like I said, they just went way too far, and they had to be replaced, and we just didn't have the funds. We hadn't done it. So council at that time passed a $1.7 million. We are, I would guess, we're between $500,000 and $600,000 into this. So there are still a lot that we're waiting on bids and we are working on, but all of these things are critical if we are to have buildings and infrastructure within those buildings. So if you go back to 18, VFW baseball field renovation, council has put $100,000 towards improvements to the VFW baseball field, and they put $100,000 towards pavement at those fields. So we currently have $200,000. We have had one presentation to council, but there's a lot of things that we are following up on that. So you will see that come to council very shortly as to that. And we're, baseball season begins here in April, so we're in a crunch to get that done. Funded depreciation, we had talked about. Title 19, where there's some amendments that we're looking at in there as far as the fences and those types of things that, you know, for salvage yards and those things. The Edinburgh Street project, we talked about that being done through 6 penny funds. And then every year in January, we do a rate study on the rates that we charge. And last year, I did not have that complete by the second meeting in January, so we had a special meeting last year. This year, I'm hoping to have it for a work session for the 21st to go over that. The last slide on page 20, all that we have for financial policy throughout our city is one policy that essentially puts the levels to approve as to who has to approve expenditures up to a certain dollar level and things. It is very antiquated, that policy, very antiquated. And that's the only policy that we have. And so a lot of these are policies that I feel that we should write over time and get these in front of council, so. So with that, I would entertain any questions that you may have on any of that. That's just kind of a quick update as to our financial structure and the different things that I'm working on that I've been assigned by council that you'll hear very soon about at council meetings. So like I said, I would entertain any questions you may have at this point on this or any other question you'd like to ask me.
Pretty straightforward. I don't have anything right now.
Okay, thank you, and turn to Panita, is that all right, Mayor?
Yep.
Thank you. I need to get myself this other machine set up. Won't take me but a moment. I'll take Okay. So I have given you a binder with a bunch of tabs in it, and some of those are going to be supporting, well, they're all going to be supporting my slides, so they're not, what I've given you is not what the slides are. So I'll direct your attention either way. And I also would like to keep this a little more informal so that you also can, if you have any questions, you can just, hey, just feel free to speak. Don't think we need to have the formalities of being recognized by the chair, and just feel free to call me Pinita.
Okay.
So to begin with, the City of Rawlins form of government is we are a city manager form of government, and this is the big definitions are included within the Wyoming state statute. And so what the city manager form of government does is, rather than have your mayor be essentially your CEO, you have a professional to do that, which is what Tom does. There are 3 city manager forms of government in Wyoming. There's Rawlins, Laramie, and Casper. The other cities in Wyoming most of them have a council mayor, and there's a few city administrator. And there's benefits and cons to each of those forms of government. So the big thing is, so I'm going to direct you to, not to necessarily look at it, but to tab number 1 in your notebook. And if you're going to be going to the WHAM conference, you will be getting a lot of these things, but I want you to have them now so that you also have a chance to look at them. So it's kind of a big document, the number 1 Mayor Council Handbook, and I don't know if this is the version they're going to be handing out to you, or if they're going to be giving you something, a revised version. But this really lays out, what are the kind of the different areas of being in a council, and what does budget mean? What do a lot of these things mean? This is not the purpose of this training today to address all of those sorts of things, but wanted to give that to you so you have a chance to look at that and become a little more acquainted with all of these sorts of things. So as I was saying, so here in Rawlins we have a council manager form of government, and so by statute, so these are codified under 15.4.201, and all legislative and policy-making powers are vested in the city council. So that's what council does. And so that little lady up there, my job is setting policy, so that's what you guys do. So just like the federal government is designed with the 3 co-equal branches of government, the legislature, the executive, and judicial, so is our local government. And you guys are the legislative branch. And so we're not gonna cover Tom's roles necessarily, or the judicial branch, which is municipal court. And so the executive branch is a city manager, but it's also the other executive functions, so like the department heads and those types of things as well. And so I think it really helps if you understand the federal, we just simplify it down here. So the principal job of a council maker is to set policy, and a policy is a course of action for the community. Policy making often takes the course of passing ordinances or resolutions, goal setting, vision setting, mission setting, all of these, like the comprehensive master plan, all of those sorts of things. Those are all part of the policy. Those are old versions. Those are other people in 2012. It's our job to look at those and see, is that what we still want to do, or have things changed? And what is in the best interest of our community? And you know, with those policies, as well as adopting a balanced budget. So ultimately, that falls to your hands too. And all of these things, these job duties, are in statute for you. I'm just trying to simplify it. And unless you want me to, I can tell you exactly which statute, but you probably don't want to go that into the weeds. But I'm happy to. So the council doesn't make policy in a vacuum, and councils rely on ideas from a lot of sources. And that includes council, the ideas of yourselves, community groups, the different advisory committees that exist, and a lot of other input, including city staff. And you consider the merits, and then as a group, collaboratively, you decide what are we gonna do together? What is the direction we're gonna go in? So a council meeting is the place to get that critical job done of making policy and the decision making. A smoothly managed and productive council meeting doesn't always guarantee the desired results of each council member, but it certainly helps to provide a forum for discussion and action. And sometimes when you've got an idea and you come in with everybody else, there's an opportunity to discuss everything. You may be swayed, or you may sway somebody. So it's a great opportunity to actually have those discussions. And here, the way our council is set up, council must make decisions by majority of vote. So there's tremendous power as a collective group for council to shape our city's policies. Inversely, an individual council member has limited power because the authority to make decisions to enact policies or take official actions resides with the council as a whole and as a collective body. So no single member can unilaterally decide or enforce measures or, force a direction. It's a collective unit. Instead, decisions require a majority vote and ensure that they reflect the collective will of the council. No one council has more power than the other council members under our form of government. This structure prevents individual members from exercising undue influence and maintains the democratic process by promoting collaboration and consensus among council members. So this also upholds the principles of, that you hear with the law is representation, fairness, and accountability. So who's the boss? So who actually runs the city, right? Well, it's important to recognize that although you're council members, the job to administer the city actually falls on the city manager. So the council sets policy, the law, but the city manager implements it through discussion with his department heads, with all the other policies that he has tasked with overseeing. And he has a big platter that he's balancing, as you just saw. So, it's not just the financial numbers that you saw, but also all of the other things. So this means that the role of the council members is not to supervise city employees on the job or become involved in the day-to-day administration, but you set the policy and then the city manager implements it. So responding to constituent complaints, right? So there's often complaints. And a lot of times those are going to be directed at the city council members. They're the ones who have the high profile jobs. They're the ones who are tasked with that hard decision-making process to, is this something that is something that the council needs to look at as a new policy? Is this priority that needs to, something that needs to be made a priority? Or is it something that's already existing and it's just that are maybe other constraints? And so as a council member, Tom and I are always here to, for you to ask, hey, what's going on with the water main situation? What's going on with the potholes or the feral cats or the derelict vehicles? You know, what's going on with these things? And sometimes there's already a policy, there's already a plan, and there may be constraints like staff, like funding, or maybe it's a lower priority and it just needs to get pushed up. So we're always happy to let you know the current status, and then as a council, if as a group decide to bring that up to a higher priority, we're happy to do whatever is directives are provided. So ordinances and resolutions. And so this can be a kind of a little bit of a confusing thing. What is the difference between an ordinance and a resolution? And how does a council, and so these are some of the big policy things that council is tasked with. So how does council do this? Typically, a council will adopt a policy by passing ordinances or resolutions. And the difference between an ordinance, it's a local law of the city, similar to a statute at the state level. And sometimes there is a lot of similarities. So, you know, you can't speed on the highway, and those are governed by state laws. And here in town, you're governed by the municipal codes, but you still can't speed on those, but you get a city ticket for those. So there is a difference in jurisdiction in regard to where the jurisdictional limits lie between the divide of local, then you go to, you know, what about county, what about state, and then you've got your federal. And they all are this kind of overlapping overlay policy. And certainly the United States, the US laws are the law of the land. So like the Constitution and all your fundamental rights, those are all there. And so we all have, all the other layers need to adhere to those. What happens with municipalities is that, right here. So if you go to tab number 3, this is your, this is the policies and the things that a city council can do, because these things are not dictated by either the federal government or the state. The state grants by the Constitution municipalities the power to govern themselves with these sets of rules. And that's why in Rawlins we have certain laws, ordinances that they don't have in Casper, and they don't have in California, and they don't have in wherever, because we have the ability to, as a municipality, to set our own rules that are tailored to our own needs. So for example, they don't have snow in, you know, Southern California, usually. So we do here, and then what are the, you know, resolutions, for example? So a resolution is something that is less formal than an ordinance, or it is only for a certain time. And so the plan might be, this year we're doing this snow clearing method, and we're gonna set a resolution to have a plan for what is going to be the snowplow route. But they don't need that in California. So the big difference is, an ordinance is something that is there, it's the law. Resolution is shorter in time, not as formal. Ordinances are also, they are the Rawlins Municipal Code that is divided into 20 chapters that we currently have, and those are our city laws, they're our operating laws. Some of them are a little bit antiquated, and we might find, hey, that's not quite working, and so either council will bring it up, or some of the committees, like planning and zoning, or I will see, hey, you know what, we're having a problem with enforcing this ordinance. Let's propose an ordinance to modify what we currently have or add something new. So an example of that would be the nuisance ordinances. So currently the nuisance ordinances are a bit of a hodgepodge of ordinances that got pushed together and filled in the gaps, and that has now become very challenging to enforce. And so I have been working with a lot of departments to try and, parse the different things out to make it user-friendly for everybody involved, for citizens to understand what is a nuisance, what constitutes a nuisance. And then also for law enforcement and code enforcement, here's the things that are gonna be cited, and also working with the municipal court on how do we do this in practicality. So it takes a big effort to get a lot of these things going. So council meetings. So council meetings entail a whole bunch of things. There's council rules of procedure, there's parliamentary procedure, there's the agenda, there's motions, and all these things that are a little bit complicated and a little bit overwhelming at first until you learn how to do it. So part of this binder that I gave you, that I'm not giving you a whole lot of direction on, but I'm hoping to touch on some of the things. So in tab number 2 are the ordinances that apply to council. And so it has city council here, and it has meetings, how do you, remote access, election of the mayor and vice mayor, vacancies and elections. I also included, just so for clarity, is city personnel on chapter 2.08 and the manager's duties, so that you can see what really Tom has to do. So the council rules of procedure are essentially, they're set out here in on tab number 2 in the meetings. Essentially, they hold the meetings. But then if you go to, let's see here. Do I have it? Okay, so the council rules, I'm sorry, I have 3 different places I'm looking at. So it's up to council. So here at 2, that's all we have, which is kind of limited. It's up to every council to establish the rules for the conduct of its meeting. Some councils adopt standard rules of procedure, which, like parliamentary procedure, such as Robert's Rules of Order, or some other parliamentary procedure. But they can also develop their own customized bylaws that govern how council meetings proceed. There is nothing that is required by state statute, so long as the actions are approved by either a majority vote or some other specific number of votes based on specific actions. Local rules are valid so long as they don't infringe on the constitutional rights or conflict with state law. A lot of those things are covered in the book under tab number 1. So additionally, councils can adopt other conduct policies in addition to those contained to the small number of procedural process we have involved in under tab number 2. And that, so right now, all we have is when are meetings held, remote attendance for meetings, what are the qualifications, and selection of the mayor, vice mayor, vacancies in office, and terms of office. Laramie, however, is an example that they have a much more comprehensive policy. Other cities also have other more comprehensive policies where it will dictate, for example, appointments for the different boards. So in Rawlins, we have 13 different committees and boards, but council appoints to 5. In some communities, those appointed members are only liaisons. They are not voting members. But in Rawlins, the way it's currently set up, they are voting members. Council can always change that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be written in policy, but it can be, hey, for this term, this is gonna be how we do this, and it's appointed. It is how that council, by consensus, might choose to proceed. Yes, so every action by a council must be approved by the group by either a majority of vote or by a specific number if it's a certain type of policy or of vote. And I actually have a cheat sheet at tab number 4. It is a Robert's Rules of Order, but it does break down general types of motions and how to proceed. And whether you use Robert's Rules of Order can be really complicated and overwhelming. But what it does is, it provides, sometimes when you don't quite know, it provides a guidance. And so that's how I look at it, as a tool. But it's not our, our formalized process for how we do things. So that is the motion. So who determines, so the agendas. Agenda is a whole other thing, which is, so you see these agendas, and you got a short one today. But then you'll see for Tuesday, it's actually already posted, there's a draft of the agenda of what is gonna go on during the council meetings. And that's what the agenda is. And so who determines this agenda? Who gets to pick what's on the agenda? And so although council has the ultimate control over the agenda, it's typically been left to the mayor, and who is the council chair, and the city manager or clerk to draft up the agenda, based on other department heads who might want to have an update, or there might be something going on, or I might add something, that there is an ordinance that, I'm recommending be approved by council. So typically that is, left to the mayor as the council chair. That can always be delegated out to somebody else. At the start of the regular council meeting, any council member by motion can change the agenda, can change the order of business or add a new item. The city of Rawlins has not formalized who controls the agenda, so this is something council will need to determine once they're seated, is who's going to control this agenda and how are the items going to be discussed, what gets on them. Council should also always provide the opportunity for appropriate public participation and is required to take public comment at regular meetings where final action is taken. And this is by statute. You have to put anything that is going to be an action item, where it's going to be the city approves this, must be put on the agenda so that the public has notice and the option to participate. And they don't have to come in person. They can watch by Zoom, they can watch, on YouTube, they can listen on the radio if that's an option. So they just need to be able to hear and participate, and if they can't make it, they can also submit a written comments. So there's a lot of ways for the public to be involved, but we have to give them notice. So if you're putting something new on the agenda within your power to do so, if it's an action item, it can only be discussion if it hasn't been on the agenda and notice provided.
Now, that is not exactly, that is exactly opposite of what the training Kathy McPherson put on stated, that an agenda is everybody wants the agenda out so everybody knows what's coming, but if something comes up that is timely or whatever, and somebody at the beginning of the meeting, when it's like a approval of the agenda, somebody can add something to that agenda that is an action item. It's legal, it's not favorable, it's not what you should do, but it is legal, and that's according to Kathy McPherson.
She also said that we don't even have to put out an agenda unless it's a special meeting, as long as we have our regular meetings. We don't even have to put an agenda out.
If there's action items, those do need to be, there is a requirement for them to be for notice. So that the public is aware.
That's not what we were taught by. Anyway, talk to 21 attorneys, you'll get 21 opinions, but that was a surprise to me that when she said that, but.
I'll review that to make sure that.
But, best practice, of course.
Right, best practice, of course.
Well, I think you sat beside me there whenever she was giving it, whenever she was discussing all of that.
Now, best practices is to put it on the agenda, but, well, I'll get into some
I'll
of that
confirm
later.
the requirements with everybody, but best practices, so at a minimum, best practices is, do provide notice and, give, for the public to have sufficient notice of what is going to occur. So during, committee meetings, when they're regularly scheduled and it's just, we're talking about whatever, and they're regularly scheduled, you don't necessarily need to publicize that because they're regularly scheduled. They always take place on the third Tuesday of the month at 5:30 in chambers, and that's when planning and zoning meets. So those don't necessarily need to be published, but they usually are because there is an action. So somebody's put in an application for, you know, a zone change or something. So,
I'm not saying it shouldn't be. I'm just stating when you get down to the fine line of the law. I always thought if it wasn't on the agenda, you could not take an action, but that's not true. You can.
well, I'll confirm with everybody. So what is parliamentary procedure and why should you use it? So parliamentary procedure is a set of rules or customs that regulates the procedure of legislative bodies. It governs how to make, amend, approve, or defeat a motion. And that's, you know, so that outline of the different types of motions is there on tab for the cheat sheet. And you can say Robert's Rules of Order, but it's kind of parliamentary procedure, different motion cheat sheet. The council in Rawlins has traditionally used a generic, general parliamentary procedure that's guided by the principles of Robert's Rules of Order. And so just as these, this cheat sheet sets out, it's usually majority vote is what the action will be. There are certain motions and certain types of actions that have different rules for how many in favor for it to pass. And those are usually set forth by statute or specific ordinance. So for example, we had a land use, a zone change motion to change it, to do a zone change. According to our ordinances, which is about zone changes in Title 19, if there is an opposition, a public opposition by a certain number of residents, in order for a zone change to pass, it has to be by 3/4 of council instead of majority. So there are 7 seats on council. A majority is 4, but 3/4 is 6. Five point something, so you gotta round up.
I've only seen it once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So business to be brought before the council is by motion, which are formalized procedures for taking actions. To make a motion, a member must first be recognized by the presiding officer, the mayor, who is the chair of the council. And after the member makes a motion, and after it's seconded if required, the chair then restates it or the rule of the order, and then calls for discussion. So there's an entire procedure for how motions are brought forth. So the mayor's role, so whoever's the mayor, their role is the chair, and they kind of handle all of the motions. So whoever is the mayor should become familiar with making sure, you know, the motions are being handled appropriately. So the mayor, as a presiding officer, holds the keys to an efficient and effective council meeting that runs smoothly and produces results. Under our form of government, manager not only participates in the meeting, but also manages the processes, the agenda, and the people involved. In general, mayors, you know, so even though the mayor is the chair of the meeting, it's really the council's meeting. And the council sets its own rules and has ultimate control over the agenda, as we discussed. So the mayor has a list of responsibilities that they have for a meeting, which is opening the meeting, announcing the business, recognizing everybody for motions, you know, stating the vote and on questions that arise, protecting the council from frivolous or delaying motions, same with public comment to make sure it's not getting out of control, and decide all questions of order. So, and as well as they get to close the meeting when all the business has been completed. Ethical issues, so a lot of these things I'm kind of flying through because, it's not really the purpose of this meeting to go in depth to everything. So ethical issues are covered, so under tab 6 is what, oh, no, I'm sorry.
8.
Actually, we're gonna start with 7. Actually, well, okay, 8 is the handbook from the WAM. So you may get a copy of this or an updated version. This is what they currently have published. And that goes through more detail. And then at tab 7 are the actual state statutes, which is actually, good for you guys to become familiar with and read these so that you understand what really you can and can't do. So the crux of the Ethics and Disclosure Act is really to prohibit you from using your position for private benefit. Private benefit really means that you can't get anything special, you can't have special privileges or exemptions for yourself or others due to your role as an elected official. And the big things that are within here that you're prohibited from are within that tab 7 is the full laws. So nepotism, you can't give jobs to your, or favors to your family. I have the word relatives here, but the actual statute uses the word family members. And I know this because we went into depth on this today. And so you can't use public funds, time, personnel, facilities, or equipment for your private benefit or that of another. Any confidential information you receive, whether it's in, some discussions, there's a contract that hasn't been released yet, discussions, negotiations, or conversations that take place in executive session. You can't share that information. You can't receive anything for your role other than your salary, which there is a salary. You get paid to attend council meetings. Maybe it's not as much as you would like, but you do get paid.
And they don't take taxes out. So if you want taxes taken out of what they give you, make sure you talk to their so they can take taxes out so you're not
You don't have to do it
paying
afterwards.
anything
Yeah.
here.
Get a W-4 from you.
I've already filled all that out.
You can't accept employment or engage in business that would you would have to disclose confidential information either. And you can't vote on matters that impact a personal or private interest. So that's the conflict of interest. An interesting thing about gifts is, so you can't accept gifts. Gifts is an interesting thing. So gifts really, it goes into that anything of value. Well, there's a lot of things that are of value, but there's exceptions, and the statute provides exceptions to what that is. So printed materials. So this binder, you can have it for free, right? Printed materials. A gift that is not used and either returned to the donor or given to a charitable organization so long as you do not claim it as a deduction on income tax. So if you get a gift, say you get, a big screen TV that's worth more than $250, you say, you know what, I can't accept this, I'm gonna donate to Boys and Girls Club, and then you claim it on your taxes, that's a no-no. That's prohibited. You have to just give it, straight, give it to them. A gift or inheritance from the council member's family, a personal friend. So exception includes, you can get a gift from a personal friend. So for example, if we're really close family friends and I give you something because of that relationship or pre-existing relationship, that's an exception. But not because I want to get on your good graces, right, as city staff. You can receive a certificate, a commemorative token or item, or a plaque that does not exceed $250 in value. Food and beverages, you can get that, especially if it comes with attending an event. You can get a loan, gift, gratuity, special discount, or hospitality that's valued at less than $250. And you can also, it's not considered a gift for the city to pay for your travel registration, lodging at a conference, while attending as an elected official. So there's some, questions on like, well, what are things based on here, the things in number 7 that I'm prohibited from doing? So for example, if you're pulled over by the police for speeding and you flash your city council credentials to get out of the ticket, not a good idea.
We get those?
We don't have
We don't have
credentials.
a card?
No.
Or a jacket.
Maybe that's why it don't work.
You can't use the city copiers to print out your kid's school project. So the engineering firm who's working on the transmission line gives you Rockies tickets. You can't accept those. You can't call Public Works, hey, there's a pothole in front of my house, knock on it. You can't call them to do that just for you. Can't use the Public Works shop bay to wash your personal car. And you cannot discuss anything during executive session with your morning coffee group, even though it's like, I bet you would love to, like they're talking about something, but you really want to spill the beans, but you can't. And why? Because the general public isn't privy to those same opportunities. So when there's a conflict of interest, and this goes back to a lot of times it goes into, there's contracts, there's all types of situations where there might be a conflict of interest. So for example, if the city is contracting on these water transmission lines and you happen to own or be a member or be an engineer with that engineering firm that got that bid, that's a conflict of interest. So you can't necessarily, would need to look at the unique circumstances, but you couldn't vote on that contract because you would have a personal benefit. And so ultimately, you know your conflicts better than anybody else. So you are ultimately responsible for determining if a conflict exists. So even if it is, maybe it's even a land use issue, planning and zoning has, looking to, somebody put in an application that they want to build, or with Board of Adjustments, they want a variance because it's this oversized garage. Well, guess who's the neighbor? You. You can't vote on that because you actually have an interest. Maybe you're for your neighbor having a big garage. Maybe you think it's blocking your view. But you have a conflict of interest because you have a direct interest in the outcome.
Well, with that being said, in the house being built next door to me, do I have the right to come in here and petition for that? Not being built? I mean, I'm not doing it as a public official, I'm doing it as a next door neighbor that doesn't want it.
Then you would have to recuse yourself and as a citizen.
I have a good example. We have a rental that they were trying to build a garage next to. And we didn't have any problems with it, but I had my husband fill out the paperwork and I had nothing to do with it because he can handle that. It was just the paperwork that they send that was for or against the what's it called?
The variance.
The variance, yeah.
Application.
Yeah. That's how I had him just handle it.
Well, that's a little bit gray because you still have an interest. So
Yeah.
ask yourself, am I or a person
Should I just
close?
not even fill out the paperwork at all?
Or actually, he could fill it out and you just have to recuse from the vote.
Well, I didn't
when it
vote
comes-
on it, no.
Oh, okay.
It never got that far.
Yeah, so, and so that's these ask yourself questions. Am I or a person close to me perceived to be financially or otherwise vested in this public issue?
The other thing about that is, does it look like I or
Perceived,
somebody
yeah.
else?
Right, does it look like I? And that's
Are
what
gonna
perceived is.
benefit.
That's why I asked the
And
question.
the perceived thing is powerful.
Because I have an interest in it, but how do I recuse myself before it goes to vote?
Well, for something like that, you would say, I live next door to the applicant, and so am I a person, am I going to be directly affected by a decision made by council?
Yes.
So yes, you would be, because that gigantic eyesore of a garage is blocking your view of Elk Mountain.
But can he voice that prior to the
As a
vote?
citizen, he could.
Yeah.
He can
That's
voice
why-
that, but he
That's what I
can't
was
vote.
asking.
Yeah.
Not the
If I
vote,
publicly
actually the vote.
recuse before when the discussion starts?
No,
Well, but also,
No.
those public comments,
Well, then there's no way for me
That's right.
Anything
to
that-
oppose that.
right, anything
Pretty
that
much.
you would do to harm the reputation of the council as a whole, you should not do.
yeah,
And that means that if you have a problem with that, but you're gonna sit here and you have a vote, the answer's gonna be no.
yeah, that's not fair.
Well, and it's,
Yeah, that's
It's not fair,
it's
but it
not,
doesn't-
because I can't oppose something that I think's gonna affect my property.
I couldn't agree with you more, Terry, but I can tell you that people, the appearance will be really bad. Number one. Number two, you're a city councilman now.
You're not voting for you.
And
You're
so
voting for everybody who lives in that area and whether or not it's a benefit to them.
you can't be both. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And it sucks. Been there myself.
It does.
But you can't. It's like,
Well, my opinion is that needs to be changed, because I should have a say.
well, that's a state law
And
thing. You
then
have to
I'm
talk to your
required to
legislators.
recuse, like you said,
Was it,
if I oppose.
Well, certainly, and not just if you oppose, if you have any interest,
what's
any
it, what are they
interest
doing
or
that
a
they're, you
perceived
gotta get your
interest.
permission, they're changing their setbacks or something?
Oh, I don't know, I was using that as
Oh,
an
just
example.
as-
When I built
okay.
my pole barn,
Yeah,
I didn't have any opposition whatsoever. I didn't even have to go get all these signatures like everybody else. I did all my stuff, went and bought my building permit. 2 days later, they brought it to the house, handed it to me, I signed the paperwork, construction was going.
Did you apply for a building permit or a variance?
Building permit.
Oh, well, then
Okay,
you
that's
can-
a whole
yeah,
different
that's
deal.
different.
But everybody else in the neighborhood, there's 3 big buildings that were built around the same time mine were. 2 of them, one of them was put off for at least 6 months, and the other one was put off for 3 damn years.
Well, some of it depends
This
on,
process.
yeah, but some of it depends on whether it's a special purpose. In other words, you have a non-conforming lot and you have to go get a variance or a Board of
Special use
Adjustments decision to allow you to do something on a non-conforming lot. In other words, it didn't fit in the box. You're wanting something a little different, you have to go to the
yours
Board of
fit, yours
Adjustment.
fit to all of our,
Yeah,
code, all of our ordinances, you
Well,
fit
I'll
all of
be
our
interested.
setbacks.
I'll be honest, I bought the lot next door, so it's not even on my lot.
Yeah, but
But it's on
But
the
you,
next one I
you
bought
fit all of
before.
that, where the other ones, there was a problem somewhere, there's either too close to some property line or something that held them up.
But now it has to be listed as one lot.
Yep.
Both of them.
Right,
Yep.
Right.
but,
Because of where I set that building on the lot.
right, but you got a building permit. There's 3 ways to get building permits. A variance, a Board of Adjustment, I guess, grants the variances,
Yep,
correct?
Yep,
And I guess there's only 2.
So who determines whether you need a variance or a?
if you go in and apply for your building permit, they'll tell you then if you need a variance or not.
Because let's say
Yeah.
you have a lot that's not square, and this garage you're wanting to build is 4 inches too close on that corner. Now you need a variance,
Yeah.
or your setback isn't
They'll make you
exactly
get variance
5 feet.
before they'll even give you a permit.
Right,
or you want to build a garage in your front yard.
Yeah, that's not legal.
in your setbacks.
Yeah.
And
So there's
the-
a whole-
Right across the street from me.
and depending upon what part of town is to
Well,
what
let me put it
rules.
this way, it might not be, but it is.
So if you want to learn a lot about this stuff, maybe you petition to be on the Planning and Zoning Commission. You will learn a
Yeah, we-
lot.
Already is plenty enough.
We gotta have
So-
Chris on the planning and zoning, so we need someone on planning and zoning.
Yes.
I love Planning and Zoning Board, it's one of my
Oh.
favorites.
Yeah, you were on there for quite some
Well, that would be the one to be on, because then you could oppose it there legally,
Yeah.
if I'm not correct.
But
Or
if
I
it's
am
something,
correct.
if it's something
That
that
impacts,
comes
That's
to
affecting
council,
you.
well, if it's something
You
to
got
also
tape
come to
on it.
council, you can't vote on it during, there.
That's what I'm saying.
No.
I would recuse just because it was next door to me. I'm very familiar with the recusing part.
Oh, yeah, it's,
So,
but,
Well, either you have a conflict or you don't. It's just that simple.
yeah.
So if I do,
then you have tape on
Basically,
your
it's
mouth.
tough, buddy, live with it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or trust that your fellow council
So
members
much
will
for
see
me.
the issue.
A resident in this town.
No, it's okay to be the residents when you get here.
Yeah,
That don't work no more.
It's not clear, so
yeah.
please feel free to ask me, or, you know, and we'll talk through it. Because sometimes the things aren't so clear. And
Well, that's why that was very unclear to me. I've seen it time and time again, so when you brought that up, I thought, wow, I hit right where I needed to get some
Right.
answers. Cool.
You do give up some privileges when you become a council person.
Yep.
You can't write on Facebook as bad as you want to.
Oh, they ought to ban
And
it.
if, oh, well, yeah, not until after January 8th. Come on, I
just
got some
wait.
catch up.
Just wait, yeah.
But you can't write on Facebook, you can't comment in a lot of ways. There's a lot of time you'll walk out of here with your mouth, your tongue bleeding because you just can't say it. But that's a problem because that's something you give up as a council person. It's terrible, but it's true. Don't think for 1 minute there hasn't been. Every now and then, I'm stupid enough to look on Facebook because somebody told me to look at something. And God, I want to write back and just tell them the facts. This is what's
Almost
real.
daily anymore.
This is not true. This is what, that's what, you can't do it as a city employee and as a council person. It is unethical. You cannot do it. You can't do it. There are people that do it. And unfortunately, they do it. But you should not, and please don't do that.
Oh, I don't like it.
It's just not, it's not acceptable. That's like talking about personnel. You can't do it. There's just certain things as a council person you can't talk about. And like when some employee screws up and for good reason, they're not an employee anymore, you take all kinds of heat from it, but you can't tell the truth.
Yep. And you
You
can't go tell one of the city employees what to do either.
No.
You don't tell that man, and he goes and tells him what to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But when something goes wrong, of course, you all are the blame.
Yeah. Seven people up here is always the ones at fault.
Yeah.
Even if something happened 20 years ago, we're the ones at fault.
20? Come on, you gotta go back further than that. Jeez.
Okay.
Okay, so speaking of what's public and what's not, Wyoming Public Records Act. So every state in the United States requires government agencies to collect and preserve internal and external documentation, communications, and all kinds of things related to official business. Agencies at all levels must be able to produce this documentation to satisfy public records requests. And so the full scope of what the Wyoming Public Records Act is, I'm not gonna go into it, but I am just gonna touch on it. I do have, I think it's tab number 5. No, it's not. That's probably it. I think it's tab number 9. Yes, tab number 9 is one section of the Uniform Municipal Fiscal Procedures at Public Records Documents and Meetings. So this is also where like public meetings are, but this Public Records Act is a small section of the state statutes. And the Public Records Act, what I've given you here is a statute of what are open to the public, because it's important that you also understand, hey, the public has a right to certain things, but there's also a lot of things that they don't have, that they're not privy to, which includes personnel files of employees. There's a lot of things that are not, that as a council member, executive session, meeting minutes and discussions, also private. Certain other things are, there's maybes. Some things require court order. And I'm not gonna go into that specifically. What I really wanna touch on, and that's why there's phones up here in my picture, is because the Wyoming Public Records Act covers a broad range of public records and requests. I'm only gonna discuss, for right now, your communications, your personal communications on your phone and on your emails that relate to, you get an email or a text from somebody about public business. So guess what? It's the topic. topic is public business, and because you're a public official, even though the statute doesn't specifically say your private text messages and emails, it discusses electronic communications. And so those are going to be subject to the Wyoming Public Records Act. This includes all of your electronic communications, your Facebook messages, your Facebook posts, anything that's done as a public official, those are subject to disclosure because those deal with public business and your official business. So it is important for you to understand that your use of personal electronic devices and any messages concerning city business that you communicate via text, email, messaging apps, on social media platforms, on blogs, forums, those are all going to be considered public record. So even if they're done in a private text message, a private messaging app, direct messaging that's not like public facing, but those are subject to disclosure. So it's important to really be aware of keeping your personal versus your private, personal versus official business separate. You're gonna get an email account from the city. All emails, keep everything there in that one. Don't mix business and pleasure. Your cell phone, your personal cell phone, is gonna be a little more difficult to do. And you can't just go deleting things, because if something comes up, the court can order you to have to turn your phone over, and they can get all of that information. There's ways to do it. I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but it's within what courts have done. So be wary of mixing communications. I have my thick notes here, so I apologize. So in summary on that topic, public records include your personal phone, things on your personal phone, on your personal computer, and your personal email if they are related. So it's best to, like, as soon as you can, switch to all this, the city account. Or, like, for example, with your election campaigns, if you had, T. Patterson for council at gmail.com, keep things there, right? Keep it separate, because I don't really, want to have to, we get a request in, I'm gonna have to ask you, hey, I need to see your computer, and I'm gonna sort through everything like, no, this is not relevant, this is, but I don't know that if you've been commingling, so I may be privy to, the things you might not want me to see, right? Okay. So now we've got the Wyoming Open Meetings Law. So the reason I selected this picture is because this is an open meeting. So we're here in a that is a designated open meeting space. And so we've got people, council is live here. We've got seating in the back for the public. And then we're also on YouTube. So this is actually a YouTube screenshot on what the public sees. So the purpose of the law is outlined in, so I think I have these tabs for you, public meetings, tabs 5 and 6. So take some time to take a look at those. So the purpose of the law is stated in the Wyoming statutes, which is 164401 at sec, states that the agencies of Wyoming exist to conduct public business. Certain deliberations and actions shall be taken as openly as provided by this act. So that means business, like we discussed earlier, the motions, the business of the council needs to be done publicly. It needs to be open for the public and your citizens and constituents to know what's going on, be informed. Whether they actually do, that's a whole other thing, but that there is that option. They can always go back to YouTube and watch these meetings. These are memorialized there. And the city's been doing that for a couple years, but there's also the audio recording, so you can go back, 20 years ago and hear what they were doing. Those are recorded on audio. So those are public records. So certain deliberations and actions shall be taken as openly as provided by the act. So government business funded by the public shall be open to the public. Business cannot be hidden to avoid embarrassment or hurt feelings or to save money, or to avoid having those hard discussions in public. So those have to be done in public. This applies to all municipalities in the state and any sub-agency of the governmental body, such as boards and commissions. So planning and zoning, open. DDA, open. All of these things are open to the public. A meeting is an assembly of at least a quorum. Here, for council purposes, there's 7 members, so a quorum is a majority, which is how many? 4. Called by the proper authority for the purpose of discussion, deliberation, presentation of information, or taking action regarding public business. So, quiz time, quick quiz. A majority of the council rides together to a conference and they discuss the pending business. Is this an open meeting violation?
Yes.
So 3 members of the council meet for coffee in a public place and start to discuss business. 4th member happens by and chimes in, is there a violation?
Yes.
Yeah, well, okay, and what does everybody else think? Is it a violation? You're just discussing.
Yes.
Yes.
You just can't vote on it.
No, not necessarily. The way I mean open meetings laws, there's one caveat that if you throw this in there, it kind of clarifies it, and that is, not only does I think this is the way it's stated, not only does the public have a right to know the conclusion, they have the right to know how the sausage was made. So, that discussion with whether you vote or not, if it has a quorum, it's a violation.
So if there's, actually, it gets a little more nuanced than that as well. If you're discussing, it's like, hey, did you hear about that? Not really, and you're not making any discussions on what type of action, that's okay. But as soon as you start to discuss what type of action, well, I'm gonna vote for that. Well, you're starting to get into the prohibited territory. And so then, especially if you have more than the quorum, you're getting into a meeting. You're actually now in a meeting that you can't be in because you're in violation of the open meetings law.
Even discussing the pros and cons of a subject is a violation at that point in time if there's a quorum.
Wouldn't that be considered trying to sway somebody one way or another?
It could be. I mean, as a city attorney, my recommendation is not to be discussing business in an informal setting, just to avoid the appearance of a potentially illegal meeting.
And the appearance of coercion.
Right. So the components of a meeting, very simple. It's called by the proper authority for proper purposes. There's a quorum, and then there's action. So notices are established. Regular meetings are held on a regular schedule. But here, notices need to be given to any person or media who requests it. So usually Bigfoot always covers meetings, or they know about it. Daily Times usually has somebody that's, at least listening in. So media always wants to know. So all of these things are published. Special meetings are meetings that are not regularly scheduled. So for example, this workshop is technically a special meeting, but it's a workshop, but there's not going to be any action done. So that's why we can call it a workshop. Special meeting is something that there's going to be action. And a special meeting may be called by the presiding member of the council by giving notice to members and the media requesting notice. Notice must specify the time, place, and business to be conducted. And so there's no minimum time, but it needs to be at least 24 hours. And so you need to say the business. So for example, it might be a catering permit that just came up. that,
Yeah, done that.
right, so exactly, common ones. But you need to say, hey, this is what it's gonna be, because it's not one of the things that normally happens out of regular term.
But if we can have a meeting, it's called an emergency one, and that is within.
Well, that's gonna be my next one. So the next one is emergency meetings. Emergency meetings are matters of serious, immediate concerns. And you make all reasonable efforts to provide public notice. And you don't necessarily have to do the big publication, but it needs to be posted on the doors for at least 8 hours, so that, and in conspicuous public places, so that the public has at least some semblance of notice about it. And all action taken at emergency meetings are temporary, and it has to be ratified at a public meeting within 48 hours. Executive sessions are only allowed for specific purposes listed in the statute. It includes threats to security, employment, appointment, dismissal, or charges against an employee, unless that employee requests a public hearing. Usually, they don't want a public hearing. Litigation matters, national security issues, real estate when publicity would increase the price, donations when the donor wishes to maintain confidentiality, information classified, considered classified by law, which might be matters concerning a juvenile. So, things like that would normally be confidential, and employment negotiations. So to enter into executive sessions, motions must be made and passed by council to enter into the session, and only discussion or information gathering is allowed, and no action can be taken in that executive session. You have to get out of executive session and you can genericify the motion so that no disclosure of the confidential discussions is made to make the action. I move we enter into a contract with, for example, a litigation issue, with outside counsel to represent the city in a litigation matter. Minutes, so there's minutes that are taken in executive sessions, and those are kept confidential without everything else. Minutes are also required of all meetings, the open meetings, even if no action is taken. It's just part of Wyoming law, so that the public has a record of what occurred, because that's part of the public records. And violations, all actions taken during meetings and violations of the Open Meeting Act are null and void. And it includes everything, contracts, employment decisions, all those types of things are null and void. Anyone attending who didn't have, and so anyone attending and that witnesses a violation that does not voice their objection on the record or doesn't do it at the next meeting can possibly be guilty of a criminal penalty of a misdemeanor for not stating it, just the way our laws are written. So the council's relationship with the city attorney. In Rawlins, as in many other municipalities in Wyoming, council appoints the city attorney. The city attorney's office here in Rawlins, I provide legal guidance to the council, the city manager, and the department heads relating to employment law, contract law, statutory and constitutional law, administrative law, police powers, procedural rules for governing bodies, and all kinds of things. I also prosecute criminal offenses and city ordinance violations and represent the city in non-insurance civil litigation. The city does have liability carrier, who is they're called LGLP, and they represent the city in liability aspects. So things where, for example, think about it kind of like your own automobile liability carrier, where it's if you do harm to something, you've got coverage for it. So same thing, our fleet of vehicles is covered by liability by this LGLP carrier. If they crash into a wall, there's that liability coverage to cover the damage and repair.
Is that noise outside?
It was
Officer
me.
Chair
Okay.
Deal.
Sorry.
She's getting impatient.
They also cover
Oh, my
such
knees
things
hurt.
as like employment issues. So if there is a discrimination claim by an employee, they will provide the legal defense for that and provide the insurance coverage to cover, certain types of claims. Not all claims, but certain things they do. So that's a little aside on how some of these things work. The city, like for example, buildings are not covered by, like maybe an accident, a slip and fall would be covered by LGLP, but not like the building structure, like your homeowners. That's a separate insurance policy. So same thing, a commercial building insurance policy. Mondays are my dedicated prosecution day, so I'm in court, dealing with speeding tickets, with larceny, with DUIs, with those kind of things. So I also represent the city in all of those types of actions, in addition to all of the other day-to-day operations. So as city attorney, I do have an open door policy with council. And I appreciate the opportunity to answer any questions you guys have. Sometimes the issues are, the questions are a little more mundane. How do you do that? Because, fair enough, council members are not always, doesn't come to mind, during a council meeting, or it's just something that's new. You're new in this. So please feel free to reach out to me anytime to, get some background or get a little more understanding on the different things that my area handles. Municipal law and government operations are really complicated things to handle. So don't feel intimidated. Don't feel like, man, I'm a knucklehead. I should know this. No, yeah, you're really. It's not within the normal realm of understanding for most people, and all of us had to go through that learning curve as well. There's no formal city policy regarding council's use of the city attorney to do research or things like that. I've seen how other cities, they do have more formalized policies where the city council will not, the city attorney will not actually do any work unless it's a majority of the council says, yeah, that's an issue we want to research. My policy is, if it's gonna take just a couple hours of my time, I am happy to do it, because for me, it also gives me the opportunity to do a little bit of a deep dive into an issue. And it is also my policy to anything that I discover or for information, I share it with everybody. That way it's a level playing field and somebody else might have a similar question. I also will work with requests to do, for example, hey, I'd like to see an ordinance, that only black boots may be worn, during council sessions, and I think that needs to be in the ordinances under Title II. You're like, okay, well, I'm happy, so I'm happy to do that. Right? I mean, and not everybody might agree, so then it gets up, so ordinances require 3 readings. And so somebody might say, you know what, this isn't a bad idea, but I think black is just kind of a bad idea. It should all be brown. Or maybe they're, something else. And so the different readings allow council to have these discussions as they think through things and make modifications during that ordinance reading process. So once you have an ordinance that comes in, there is the ability to make modifications, to make little changes, to tailor it as you learn more, as the public learns more, to take that feedback. And that's where, that policy making isn't in a vacuum. It's the feedback, it's the discussions, and as you learn more. So that's where there's opportunity to continually make changes to things. So as a city attorney, there's some things that you can help to make my job easier. And if you see a legal issue brewing, let me know. Let me know right away. And maybe it is a legal issue, maybe it isn't, or maybe turns out it's a big deal, Let me or Tom know, and it's always helpful to know ahead of time. Maybe there's something that needs to be discussed with the council, but you think like, is this something that should be discussed in executive session? Well, you don't always know, and I'm happy to help guide you on, yeah, that's definitely need to go in executive session, or no, that's not one of the items that statute, because we have to follow what statute says. We can't kind of like carve our own exception. that no, that's something that needs to be discussed openly. It's also, one of the responses that's gonna be frequent is if you say, hey, what's the answer to the, what's X, Y, Z? And I am probably gonna say, I don't know, let me research that, let me confirm. And I will get back to you. So I think, I know you guys probably wanna get out of here, but we have we have all of us here right now, and this is an ideal time for you to ask questions, get additional background, and then understand some of the other things going on with the city. So what's going on with the water transmission line? What's going on with, is the city involved in any civil litigation? Probably can't just discuss that right now because that's an executive session.
I was like,
What's going on, so for example, the Lawrence property, what's going on with, the contract for what is brownfield? What is, what are the ordinances that I should be aware of? Is there anything that you, as a new council member, that you want to know more about or to get some more clarification?
Nothing that I have currently, but I direct a lot of questions to Lynn already.
So one of the good ways for Tom and I to help you guys, for any of the council members, rather than, can we do X? It's often, if we can be a little more creative and say, how can we do a certain thing? Because then we open up the options and it allows us to be creative. Does anybody have any questions for me?
I do not.
Not now, but I guarantee you in the future I will.
We're always here.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I hope this was helpful. If I prepared those binders for you guys, I think are some of the main areas that are the most confusing. And, please feel free to look through those. If you have any questions, reach out to me or Tom. And if you don't need these, feel free to just abandon them. I won't be offended because I can always use binders. All right, thank you.
A lot of things have been covered tonight. I'm just gonna go over a few things that, if anybody wants to be the mayor, what's it take to be the mayor, and how, if you don't wanna be the mayor, how can you help the mayor be more successful? You're a team. Yeah, you go home and watch a few city council meetings and decide, is that the look we want? What could have been done better? Ask the questions, do that. The basic job of the mayor is to run the meetings. I run them with, because there's never been a designation of what to run them by. This is parliamentary procedure. It's what, it ain't even a quarter of an inch thick. It's a very good guideline. It leaves enough flexibility to do what you need to do to make a motion. Just remember these 4 words. I move that we. Start every motion with that. I move that we, whatever. It'll go much smoother. Drives me crazy when people say, I'd like to make a motion that we. Well, then go ahead. You know what I mean? You're expressing a desire to make a motion. But if you're intending on making a motion, make the motion. That's always been a beef of mine. These books are very, very short, sweet, but powerful. They tell you how it should go. There was a mention tonight about, Laramie does it a different way, but if you read those rules, it's like you can speak twice on any subject, and then you can't speak anymore. I don't like that because I want a robust discussion. Sometimes it goes on to the point of, oh my God, let me up for air here, I want to die. But fact of the matter is, a longer discussion does create a a better product. So be careful what you pass. Now, if you'd rather go by the Robert Rules of Order and memorize this, you could, because this is the Robert Rules of Order. This is one version of it. There's 27 of them. This is version 12. So make sure if you do say we're going to run them by Robert Rules of Order, you say what version, and then memorize every single line in that book. Because if you don't, you're not going to go by one of those lines in the book, and you're going to find yourself in the funny papers. There are people that love records requests and suing the city and suing the councilman and all that. I have a stack of papers that thick on my desk. If you want to stop by, I'll show them to you. More than happy to. So be careful what you tie yourself to. How involved does it have to be to accomplish the goal of running the meeting? The meeting is not a bitch session for the citizens to come in here and complain and yell and scream and bring their torches. That's not what a city council meeting is about. City council meeting is a business meeting of the city to do city's business. Those other things, that should happen on a private basis. Every one of us have our phone numbers in public. There are cards out front, tell you right how to get a hold of us. If a citizen has a complaint and they can't cure it by talking to the city staff, which is amazing, by the way, they really do a heck of a job of taking care of the citizens. But they really, if they have a problem with the council, they should start with the city councilman. They really should, in their ward. That's why we're in wards. Coming here and yelling and screaming and carrying on during citizens' comment does almost zero good. You can't make a decision. You can embarrass a city council person, but it depends on what your goal is, I guess. But anyway, this is a business meeting that they have. City council has. To learn what should you do, what shouldn't you do, what's legal, what's not legal, how to stay out of jail the longest, go to WHAM. Take that boot camp of WHAM. It's very involved. It's going to cram your head full of stuff so fast that you're going to go home and go, I don't even know how I learned all that. But they send you home with books to refresh. WHAM is an incredible resource that works on these things every day. They have a boot camp at the beginning of every election cycle, so please sign up and go to that. Can't say enough about that, about learning to hone your skills as a council person. And to be effective, what do you want to be? If you want to be effective, go learn those things and you will become more effective. The other thing that a mayor does is approve the agendas. A lot of people think that, well, the mayor did the agenda. No, I didn't. Tremendous amount of work goes into building an agenda. Lynn normally has those 100% ready, sometimes not so much, but here's what it takes to do an agenda. We just did one tonight, and I probably can't find it. But what happens is, in an agenda, you have all the items, but then you have all the supporting documents. The department head tells you, hey, I want this on the agenda. And this is so then there might be 200 pages of supporting documents saying what, why, and when should we do this. That goes on the board docs, and assembling all these things on board docs and getting them ready to go. And then reading these 300 pages and deciding what should the motion read. What motion, what are the options in motions and what should they read? That gets put in. It's a tremendous amount of work. One of the reasons that the mayor approves the agenda, I believe it's in state law actually, approves the agenda is if somebody wants something on the agenda that's going to put the city in a really bad position, like I want to talk about something that's I know is going to be a lawsuit, we're not talking about it. You know, if they ask me, I have made this promise to my councils both times that I will put anything on the agenda you want unless it will harm the city. I think there's been one time I've asked that one of the city councilmen weighed on that. I explained why they graciously did that, not to put the city, you know, in a bad situation. If you want to talk about something that's, you know, coming up. There's just certain things you can't talk about ahead of time or else you put the city in a poor position. Let's just say that you happen to get a mayor that won't put it on the agenda. So what you can do is in a meeting say, I move that we add whatever it is to the agenda next time. Somebody seconds it, it gets an affirmative vote by 4 people, it will be on the agenda next time. So the mayor can't block you totally. It's a matter of trying to figure out what's the best and when and such like that. The other thing we've caught heck a little bit about on the agenda is putting it out a little bit late, but there are all these issues coming at the city so fast and so hard that you can do one of 2 things. You can put the agenda out a day late or so and get all that supporting document and have it complete, or you can bump that issue to the next meeting. Pretty soon that snowball effect, guess what? There's no more meetings to push it to. Or because of the timeliness of it, you miss something. You miss a grant, you miss a whatever. So it's worth hurrying up and getting it done. The city's always been super busy since I've been here, and it's just best to get it over with. Now, what I have done as the mayor is I have asked Vice Mayor Sanger to sit in with me when we go over the agendas, and I do that because I believe that we turn out a better product. 2 of us thinking, along with Tom and Lynn, we talk about all that sort of thing, and it just is, it's been good for me anyway to have a second opinion about what to put on the agenda. For the most part, the agenda, the way agendas are laid out is pretty much boilerplate. We get it from the WHAM, I guess. We follow a WHAM suggestion, and when you have people like that have honed this in for so long, who are we to think we're smarter and change it? That's been my opinion. The other job as the mayor is to greet guests and the ceremonial items. Boys and Girls Club, for instance, I didn't get to, I was sick during that time, so Vice Mayor Sanger welcomed into Rawlins. We've had the Lions Club come, all kinds of different things where the mayor goes talk to, anywhere from talking to the president of the University of Wyoming, or going to SLIB for a couple days to bring home a few $1 million, or to go to WHAM to participate. I was on the executive board of directors there. I was on the legislative leadership committee with WHAM, and I can tell you a lot of those meetings took place over the computer or whatever. Some of them were in person. It's like anything else. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it. The more you learn. This is the way it's always been with me anyway. The more that I learn, the more I want to learn. And by being able to understand all the moving parts of the state, you become a lot more successful at bringing things to Rawlins. You can't just stay within the city limits of Rawlins and expect to bring good things to our town. That isn't the way it works. You have to go out and participate with these state programs and such like that. Last year, just before I came, last year, this happened, and just before I came, I counted how many meetings did I go to. There's 12 months a year. How many meetings did I actually go to for the city? And it was a total of 122 meetings. And if you want to see my phone and look at my calendar, you're certainly welcome to. That comes to 12 meetings a month. Sometimes they're 3 a day, sometimes some of them are half hour long, some of them were a day long. But it was 122 of them. It's a commitment that I said I wanted to do, and that's what I did. And so when it comes time to help your mayor, whoever that may be, look better to the whole state of Wyoming and whatnot, participate, help the mayor. Don't let them sit up here and not know what you know. When COG comes to town, Council of Governments, go. Let them know Rawlins is alive. Same with WHAM. Unbelievable amount of information you will get from WHAM. Is there anybody here that has been to WHAM that wishes they didn't go? It's that important. The other thing is if everybody in the city happens to stay in their lane, it'd be great. City councilmen have, I'll give you an example, 3 employees. The judge, and I gotta leave something to trick him here, I can't decide what. The judge, the city manager, and the city attorney. Those 3 people work for the council, not you, not you, not you, not me, the council. That is one of the hardest things, is to get the council to speak to these people in one voice, because they don't jump through hoops for any one of us. It's us. It's the council gives the overview, and then they go do the work. And really, there isn't a whole lot of more I have to say. I could talk for a long, long time about what it takes to excel at running the city, but it's a very important position. Very important. Probably some of the most important people in this town are the people that are going to end up sitting behind this here. And if you work as a team, you'll get a lot done. And if you don't, well, guess what? You'll stalemate and just stop where you're at. When I was in Evanston looking at their beautiful roundhouse it was a railroad roundhouse that they had remodeled. It was, oh my God, it was horrible. But the city remodeled it. It's now one of the finest convention centers in Wyoming. It is absolutely breathtaking, isn't it?
It is.
And when I went there for Leadership Wyoming, I remember asking the city manager, how did you get this done? The city didn't have any money. And he said, he stared at me for a while. He said, are you asking me if we have cave people here? And of course, I'm thinking the furs, clothes, and all. And he said, citizens against virtually everything. And if you let them slow you down, they will not only slow you down, they'll stop you. You won't have anything this beautiful in your city. And I've always, that's how it is, you know. I'm not saying don't listen to everybody. I'm just saying be careful who you listen to. And when people say, well, you know, I was talking to my constituents, are you sure it wasn't at your dinner table? And is that a big enough group, test group? You know what I mean? Like, fortunately or unfortunately, whatever way you want to look at it, depends on whether you're me or my wife, when you go shopping, everybody knows you. So I get a pretty good viewpoint of what everybody's thinking, because they know to come and praise me, yell at me, whatever's on their mind, and I listen to it, and I then know kind of what the mood is out there, but you have to do what's right for the city. I'm going to say a couple more things, and I'm going to shut up, but Rawlins is at a time when it can really, really just be so much better. And I hope you are. Hope you make it that way. I hope you're all successful. I'm not going to lie to you, I'm going to miss it, just because of the wonderful people I got to work with, being some of the council and the staff and the employees of the city, and they're amazing. If you've watched the meetings over the last even year, I don't know how many of our city employees have gotten state and national awards, but we have a lot of them. The cream of the crop. Sometimes I don't think they get talked to like they're the cream of the crop by the citizens out there. I don't think they appreciate them enough. But you're pretty fortunate individuals, and now I'll shut up. Thanks. Any questions? Call me anytime. I'll give you coffee, and it ain't $125. It's just a cup of coffee.
One quick thing is, you're right, it doesn't say that the agenda has to be published. So you're right, I'm under tab 5, where the open meetings law is, it doesn't require the agenda to be published.
When I heard that, it shocked me a little bit because I thought it should, and I still believe it should. But the distinction is, does it legally have to or should it? Of course, best practice is, of course, you publish it. That's another thing. I sat through, this is an interesting thing. I sat through this thing at, I don't even remember where it was, Wyoming Association of County Officials, and this guy that was an attorney for the newspapers got up there and he's like, you have to publish these minutes and you have to this and they have to be accurate and you have to do this and boy God, and he just went on and on and on. So I couldn't help myself. I stood up and asked, can I speak? Yes. Well, you're saying that there's this tremendous jail sentence and fine for not doing this, not publishing these and not putting them in the paper and whatnot. But when you guys print them wrong, shouldn't there be something there? I got a standing ovation and the guy hates me, but that's how it is. But I think this council and the last one, I've been here for 2 cycles. We have worked our butt off to be transparent. We record the meetings. People can come. If they don't know what happened at a city council meeting, that's their fault. And no one that's an elected official that I've ever known wanted anything but highly informed people. Tell them what's going on. That's what everybody wants. So when people say, well, we need more transparency, tell them to bring their couch up here and sit their fat ass right here in this room, because that's why they aren't informed, because they're at home sitting on their couch. Tell them to come here. That's just how it is. And no, I'm not a Facebook fan. Those opinions mean zero. Anyway, with that, shut up. Thank you guys for coming. Good luck to you. And if I can help you in any way, let me know. And like I said, a cup of coffee isn't $125, so I'll buy a cup of coffee anytime. How's that?
Just one more thing, the next council meeting is on the 7th. We are having, it's not really a work session, it's just gonna be open to the public, open to your family members. It's just gonna be a light reception with some food and some things, so bring your family members. It's for the council going out and for the new council coming in. I'll have some food and things like that. So it's just gonna be a casual, we'll start about 6 o'clock. You can come in when you'd like with your family and things, but just bring your family, it would be nice.
I'll be able to have a beer, you won't.
No, we're not having alcohol during the reception.
You don't know what's in my
Second
flask.
half, you can have that.
Oh, yeah,
You're
that's
not done
right.
until the
Oh,
second
that's
half.
So,
When new business happens.
yeah.
Yeah. I'll just roll my cooler in the back row.
Have you dismissed us, Mayor?
Oh, yeah, this meeting's adjourned.